The bowl of stew sat untouched on the rough wooden table, steam no longer rising from its surface, and the orc girl stared at it with hollow eyes that had seen too much hunger to trust a meal given freely. Harold Moss had found her 3 days ago while checking his fence line near the forest edge, crumpled in a ditch with blood matted in her dark hair, and her green skin pale from blood loss. He had carried her back to his farmhouse despite every instinct screaming that orcs meant danger, that they raided farms like his, that helping one would make him a traitor to his own kind. But she had been so small, so broken, and the war wound in her side had been inflamed with infection. He was a veteran himself, had fought in the border skirmishes 5 years back, and he knew a dying soldier when he saw one regardless of what color their skin happened to be. For 3 days, she had drifted in and out of fever while he cleaned her wound and forced water between her cracked lips. This morning she had finally woken with clear eyes, and he had been relieved enough to make a proper meal. Rabbit stew with carrots and potatoes from his garden, thick and nourishing. He had set it before her with a clean spoon and stepped back, giving her space. That had been 2 hours ago. She had not touched it, had not even picked up the spoon. She simply sat there in the oversized shirt he had dressed her in, her muscular frame somehow looking fragile, and stared at the cooling stew like it might bite her. Harold stood in the doorway to his small kitchen, arms crossed, studying her. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with the characteristic green skin of the mountain clans and small tusks that protruded just slightly over her lower lip. Her black hair was short and choppy, like someone had hacked it off with a knife. The wound in her side was bandaged with clean linen, and he knew it would scar badly. "You need to eat," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "You have lost a lot of blood." Her yellow-gold eyes flicked to him briefly, then back to the bowl. She said nothing. He tried again. "It is just rabbit, nothing fancy, but it is hot and it will help you heal." Still nothing. But he saw her throat work in a swallow, saw the way her hands trembled slightly where they rested on the table edge. She was afraid. Of the food. Of him. Of poison. Harold felt something twist in his chest. He had seen that look before in the eyes of prisoners during the war. People who had been starved or tortured, who no longer trusted even basic kindness because it had been used as a weapon against them. He moved slowly into the kitchen, pulled out the other chair from his small table, and dragged it around so it sat directly across from her. She tensed, her body coiling like she might bolt despite her injuries. But he simply sat down heavily, leaned back, and met her eyes. "I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly, "and the food is not poisoned. I have been feeding you broth for 3 days while you were unconscious. If I wanted you dead, I would have just left you in that ditch." Her jaw tightened. When she spoke, her voice was rough from disuse, accented with the guttural tones of orcish. "Why did you not leave you?" He shrugged. "You were hurt. Seemed like the right thing to do. I am orc. I noticed. Your kind kill my kind kill yours." "That is true," Harold acknowledged. "But you were unconscious and bleeding out. Did not seem like you were much of a threat at the time." Something flickered across her face. Confusion maybe, or disbelief. She looked down at the stew again, and he saw her nostrils flare as she caught the scent of it. Her stomach growled audibly. "Eat," he said again. She shook her head slightly, a jerky motion. Her hands curled into fists. Harold studied her for a long moment, then understanding clicked into place. He had seen this before too, with the younger soldiers. Some cultural thing about eating alone, about sharing meals. He had never learned much about orc customs during the war, beyond how to avoid their blades, but perhaps this was something like that. "You need me to stay?" he asked. "While you eat," her eyes snapped up to his, wide and startled. For a moment she just stared at him, and he saw something vulnerable crack through her guarded expression. Then she gave a single, tiny nod. Well then. Harold stood and moved to the small stove where the pot of stew still simmered. He ladled out a portion for himself into a chipped ceramic bowl, grabbed a spoon from the drawer, and returned to the table. He sat back down across from her and began to eat, keeping his movements casual and unhurried. For several long seconds, she just watched him. Then, slowly, her hand crept toward the spoon beside her bowl. She picked it up with careful fingers as if it might shatter and dipped it into the stew. She brought a small bite to her mouth. Harold kept eating his own meal, not staring at her, giving her space while still being present. He heard her take another bite, then another. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her shoulders start to relax incrementally. They ate in silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons against ceramic and the crackle of the fire in the stove. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, until she was soaking up the last of the broth with a heel of bread he had set beside the bowl. When she finally set down her spoon, she looked more alive than she had since waking. Some color had returned to her green skin, and her eyes were brighter. She looked at him properly for the first time, really looked at him, taking in his weathered face and the gray threading through his brown hair, the scar that ran along his jawline, the calluses on his hands. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You are welcome," Harold replied. "What is your name?" She hesitated, then answered. "Grisha." "Grisha," he repeated, nodding. "I am Harold. This is my farm. You are welcome to stay until you are healed enough to travel." Her expression shuddered again, wariness creeping back in. "Why?" "Because you need a place to recover and I have a spare room. You are human. And you are orc. We have established this." He stood and collected both bowls, carrying them to the wash basin. "Look, I do not know what happened to you or how you ended up in that ditch, but you are hurt and you have nowhere else to go, or you would not have been dying in my pasture. So you can stay here, eat regular meals, and heal. When you are well enough, you can decide what you want to do next." Grisha was quiet for a long moment. "My clan will not take me back," she said finally, her voice carefully flat. "I am exile." Harold turned to look at her, water dripping from his hands. "What did you do?" "I refused to kill a human child during a raid." Her eyes met his, defiant and pained at once. "The child was 6 summers old, crying for her mother. My war leader said to cut her throat. I said no. So they beat me, took my weapons and my armor, and left me to die as punishment for my weakness." Something cold and furious settled in Harold's chest. He had seen the aftermath of orc raids, had helped bury the dead. But he had also seen what human soldiers did to orc settlements when they swept through in retaliation. War made monsters of everyone, and apparently it also destroyed those who refused to become monsters. "That was not weakness," he said firmly. "That was strength. Takes more courage to refuse an evil order than to follow it." Grisha blinked at him, clearly not having expected that response. Her throat worked again and she looked away quickly, but not before he saw her eyes begin to shine with unshed tears. "Anyway," Harold continued, drying his hands on a cloth, "you are not an exile here. You are a guest, and my guests eat at my table." She faltered, then tried again. "In my clan, we do not eat alone. To eat alone is to be cut off, to be no one. To share a meal is to share trust, to share fire and safety. I could not eat without." She trailed off, looking frustrated with herself. "Without someone sitting with you," Harold finished gently. "I understand." "That is fine. Mealtimes I will sit with you. It is no trouble." "Why would you do that? I am nothing to you." "Maybe," Harold acknowledged, "but you are hurt and you are here and I can help. That is reason enough." Grisha stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Then very quietly she said, You are strange for a human." Harold huffed a laugh. "I get told that fairly often. Come on, you should rest. Your wound needs to be checked and the bandages changed." She allowed him to help her back to the small bedroom he had set up for her, limping heavily and pressing one hand to her injured side. He had her sit on the edge of the narrow bed while he fetched his medical supplies, the same kit he had kept from his army days. "This is going to hurt," he warned as he carefully unwrapped the bandage, "but I need to make sure there is no infection setting in." Grisha nodded stiffly and gripped the edge of the bed frame. She did not make a sound as he cleaned the wound with sharp-smelling alcohol, though he saw her knuckles go white and her jaw clench hard enough that he worried about her tusks cutting into her lip. The wound looked better than it had, the angry red inflammation fading to pink, the edges beginning to close. "Healing well," he said, applying fresh salve and wrapping clean bandages around her torso. "Whatever weapon got you, it missed anything vital. You were lucky." "Lucky," she repeated with a bitter edge. "Yes, very lucky." Harold secured the bandage and sat back. "I know it does not feel that way now, but you are alive. That counts for something." "To who?" "I am outcast. I have no clan, no family, no place. Among my people, I am already dead." "Then you will have to make a new place," Harold said pragmatically. "Build a new life. Plenty of people have done it before. Humans do not accept orcs. Orcs do not accept traitors. Where would I go?" It was a fair question, and Harold did not have a good answer for it. The prejudice ran deep on both sides, generations of bloodshed breeding hate and fear. An orc trying to live among humans would face violence and rejection, and she had already been cast out by her own people. "I do not know," he admitted, "but you do not have to figure it out today. For now, just focus on healing." Grisha looked at him with an expression he could not quite read, something raw and vulnerable beneath the guarded exterior. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Harold considered the question seriously. "I spent 5 years fighting in a war I did not believe in, following orders I did not agree with, watching good people die for bad reasons. I came back here to try and build something better, something quiet. When I found you, I had a choice. I could leave you to die like your clan did, like the soldiers I served with would have done, or I could try to be better than that." He met her eyes steadily. "I chose to be better. Simple as that." She was quiet for a long time, studying his face like she was trying to memorize it. Finally she said, "I will not forget this. When I am healed, I will repay the debt." "There is no debt," Harold said. "Just get better, that is all I ask." He left her to rest and returned to his daily chores, though his mind kept drifting back to the orc girl in his spare room. He had not been lying when he said helping her was the right thing to do, but he also knew he had opened a complicated door. If anyone from the nearby town found out he was harboring an orc, there would be trouble. The miller's farm had been raided 2 seasons back, and old Joseph still bore the scars. People would not understand. They would call him a traitor or mad or worse. But when he brought Grisha dinner that evening and pulled up his chair to sit with her while she ate the potato soup and fresh bread he had made, seeing the careful way she handled the spoon and the gratitude in her eyes, he knew he had made the right choice regardless of the consequences. Over the following days, a quiet routine developed between them. Harold would wake before dawn as he always did and tend to his animals, a handful of chickens and 2 goats that provided eggs and milk. He would make breakfast, simple fare like porridge or eggs, and bring it to Grisha's room. He would pull up the chair from his kitchen and sit with her while they ate together, often in silence at first, though gradually small conversations began to emerge. She told him about growing up in the mountain clan, about training as a warrior from the time she could walk, about the harsh code of honor that governed every aspect of orc life. She spoke of it matter-of-factly, without self-pity, but he could read between the lines. It had been a brutal existence, where weakness meant death, and mercy was seen as betrayal. He told her about his own past in turn, about growing up on this same farm with his parents, until fever took them both when he was 17. About being conscripted into the border wars and spending 5 years fighting a conflict that seemed to have no purpose beyond perpetuating itself. About coming home to a farm that had gone fallow and spending the last 3 years trying to rebuild it into something productive. "You work very hard," Grisha observed one morning as she watched him prepare to go mend a section of fence. She had been there a week now, and though she still tired easily, she was strong enough to walk around the small farmhouse. "Farm does not run itself," Harold said with a shrug. "And I am only one person. Always more work than hours in the day." She frowned at that, something thoughtful crossing her face, but she did not say anything more. By the second week, Grisha was moving around with more confidence, though he insisted she take it easy. She had started joining him in the main room of the house, rather than staying in her bedroom, sitting in the worn armchair by the fireplace and watching as he went about his evening tasks. He found himself appreciating the company, the house feeling less empty with another person in it. One evening he came in from the fields to find her attempting to help with dinner, standing at his small kitchen counter and awkwardly chopping vegetables with her left hand while keeping her right arm pressed against her injured side. "What are you doing?" he asked, moving quickly to take the knife from her. "You are going to tear your stitches." "I am being useless," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "You work all day, then cook and clean and care for me like I am an infant. I can help. You are recovering from a major wound." "That is not being useless, that is healing. I am Orc. We heal fast. The wound is closed, see?" She lifted the edge of her shirt before he could stop her, showing him the bandaged area. "I am strong enough to help," Harold sighed. "I am sure you are. But I would rather you take another week to make sure everything is fully healed than have you overdo it and make things worse." "I am going mad sitting still," Grisha said bluntly. "Please, let me do something." He could understand that. After years of military life and warrior training, sitting idle probably felt like torture to her. And he could see the stubborn set of her jaw, the way her hands kept flexing like they needed a task. "All right," he conceded, "but nothing that requires heavy lifting or stretching. You can chop vegetables while sitting down. Deal, deal." So he set her up at the table with a cutting board and the vegetables, and they prepared the meal together, Harold handling the pot and the stove while Grisha diced carrots and onions with steady precision. He found himself oddly content with the domestic scene, the comfortable silence between them broken only by the sounds of cooking. When they sat down to eat, Harold pulled up his chair as had become habit, and Grisha served them both portions of the stew they had made together. She ate with better appetite now, no longer picking at her food, and there was more color in her green skin. "This is good," she said, gesturing at the bowl. "Better than army rations." "Most things are better than army rations," Harold agreed. "I remember trying to choke down some of the things they fed us during the war. Pretty sure half of it was not actually food." Grisha snorted, a sound that might have been a laugh. "Orc war bands carry dried meat and journey bread, hard as stone and tastes like dirt, but it keeps you alive." "I think I prefer rabbit stew." "I think I prefer it too," she admitted, then added more quietly, "I prefer this, sitting at a table, not eating from a shared war pot while planning the next raid." Harold met her eyes across the table. "You did not like being a raider. It was not a question." She shook her head slowly. "No, I did it because it was what I was born to do, what my clan expected, but I did not like it. The burning, the killing, the fear in people's eyes. It felt wrong. I thought I was just weak, that I did not have a warrior's heart." She paused. "My mother said I thought too much. That thinking was for shamans and leaders, not for soldiers. What happened to your mother? She died in a raid 4 years ago. Arrow through the throat. Quick death. Honorable." Grisha's voice was carefully neutral, but her hands had tightened around her spoon. "I am sorry," Harold said. "Why? You did not kill her, and she died in battle, which is what every orc warrior wants." "Maybe, but she was still your mother. You are allowed to grieve that." Grisha looked at him with that same confused expression she often wore when he said things like that, as if he were speaking a truth she had never been allowed to consider. She set down her spoon and was quiet for a moment. "I miss her," she said finally. "Even though she was hard and she did not understand me, I miss her. Is that foolish?" "No," Harold said gently. "That is human. Well, I suppose in this case it is orc, but you know what I mean. That is normal. Missing someone does not require them to have been perfect." Grisha nodded, blinking rapidly. Then she picked up her spoon again and returned to her meal, and Harold let the moment settle without pushing further. As the 3rd week arrived, Grisha began helping more around the farm despite Harold's protests. She would gather eggs from the chickens while he milked the goats, moving carefully but capably. She helped with washing dishes and preparing meals, and gradually took over most of the cooking entirely, which Harold did not mind since she turned out to be surprisingly skilled at it. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked one evening as she served up a dish of roasted vegetables and chicken that was better than anything he had made in years. "From watching my mother and the clan cooks," Grisha said. "Warriors must feed themselves on long campaigns. I paid attention." "Well, this is excellent, thank you." She looked pleased at that, a small smile tugging at her tusked mouth. Harold found himself thinking that she had a nice smile when she allowed herself to show it. Most of the time she kept her expression carefully neutral, guarded, but occasionally he would catch glimpses of something softer beneath. They fell into an easy companionship over meals, and Harold found himself looking forward to the evenings when they would sit together at the table and talk about everything and nothing. She asked him questions about human culture, about farming, about books. She was clever and curious, her mind quick despite having had little formal education beyond warrior training. He taught her to read better, using the handful of books he owned to practice. She already knew basic written language, something taught to all orc warriors for reading maps and orders, but she struggled with more complex texts. They would sit together after dinner, going through pages slowly, and he found that she learned fast when she set her mind to it. "Why are you doing this?" Grisha asked one night as they worked through a particularly difficult passage. "Teaching me. You could just let me stay ignorant." "Why would I want that?" Harold asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because ignorant people are easier to control, less dangerous." "I am not trying to control you, Grisha, and you are going to be dangerous regardless of whether you can read philosophy. You were trained as a warrior." "Was," she echoed. "I have no weapons now, no armor. I am not a warrior anymore." "Just because you do not have weapons does not mean you are not dangerous," Harold pointed out. "I have seen you move. You are skilled, trained. That does not go away." She was quiet, then said, "Would you be afraid of me if I were armed?" Harold considered the question seriously. "Maybe initially. I would be cautious, certainly. But no, I do not think I would be afraid. You have had plenty of opportunity to hurt me if that was your intention. You have not. I could have done it in my sleep, snapped your neck while you were changing my bandages. But you did not." "No," she agreed softly. "I did not." There was something weighted in the silence that followed, some shift in the air between them that Harold could not quite name. He was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, both leaning over the same book, her shoulder almost touching his. He cleared his throat and leaned back, putting some space between them. "We should call it a night, early morning tomorrow." Grisha nodded, closing the book carefully. "Thank you for the lesson, any time." He lay awake that night longer than usual, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom and thinking about the orc woman sleeping in the room across the hall. About how natural it had started to feel, having her there. How the farmhouse no longer felt empty with her presence filling it. How he caught himself smiling at her dry sense of humor, or watching the way the firelight caught in her dark hair. That was dangerous thinking. She was orc, he was human. She was his guest, recovering from trauma and exile. She had nowhere else to go, which meant anything between them would be complicated by that power imbalance. And even if none of those things were factors, the rest of the world would not accept them. Humans and orcs did not fall in love. They killed each other. He needed to keep things simple, friendly but appropriate. Just two people sharing a house, nothing more. That resolution lasted until the next evening, when he came in from mending the barn door to find Grisha attempting to reach something on the high shelf in the kitchen. She was stretched up on her toes, her shirt riding up to reveal the green skin of her lower back and the edge of her bandages, and when he moved to help her, their hands brushed against each other as they both reached for the jar of dried herbs. The contact was electric, sending a jolt through him that had nothing to do with anything sensible. Grisha jerked her hand back like she had been burned, her yellow eyes wide as she stared at him. For a moment, they both stood frozen, too close together in the small kitchen, and Harold could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Then Grisha took a step back, breaking the moment. "Thank you," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "I could not reach." "You should have waited for me," Harold managed, taking down the jar and handing it to her while trying to ignore the way his hand was trembling slightly. "You could have torn your stitches. I am healed now. The stitches came out yesterday, remember, right?" He had removed them himself, marveling at how cleanly the wound had closed, her orcish constitution proving stronger than human healing. She had barely flinched as he had cut and pulled the thread, and afterward there had been only a puckered scar remaining. "Still, be careful." She studied his face, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slowly and turned back to preparing dinner, and Harold fled outside to finish his work, needing the cold evening air to clear his head. This was getting complicated. A few days later, Harold went into the nearby town to sell eggs and buy supplies. He left Grisha at the farm, knowing it was not safe for her to accompany him. If anyone saw an orc, there would be panic and violence. The town of Millbrook was small, perhaps 200 people, clustered around a central market square. Harold knew most folks by name, had grown up here, and generally people were friendly enough. But as he made his way through the market, he picked up on an undercurrent of tension. "Did you hear about the Thompson farm?" Mrs. Garrett asked as he bought flour from her stall. She was a stout woman with sharp eyes and sharper gossip. "Attacked 2 nights ago." Harold felt his stomach drop. "Attacked? By who?" "Orcs, who else?" "Came down from the mountains, burned their barn and killed half their livestock. James Thompson put an arrow in one of them, but the rest got away." "Was anyone hurt?" "Not seriously, thank the gods. But folks are scared, Harold. That is the 3rd raid this month. People are talking about forming a militia, going up into the mountains and clearing out the tribes once and for all." Harold kept his expression neutral, though his mind was racing. "That would be a bloodbath on both sides," Mrs. Garrett sniffed. "Maybe so, but we have to protect our own. Those monsters do not understand anything but violence." He finished his transaction quickly and moved through the rest of his errands with growing unease. The hostility toward orcs was always present in the border towns, but it seemed to have intensified recently. If a militia did form and go into the mountains, it would mean war. And if anyone discovered he was harboring an orc at his farm, they would consider him an enemy. He needed to figure out what to do about Grisha. She was healthy now, her wound healed. She could travel if she needed to. But to where? She had nowhere to go, no clan to return to, and any human settlement would be as dangerous for her as staying with him. When he returned to the farm, loaded down with supplies, he found Grisha in the garden she had started tending. She had planted some late-season vegetables the week before, working the soil with intense focus, and now she was carefully watering the emerging seedlings. She looked up as he approached, her face brightening in a way that made something warm unfurl in his chest. "You are back. How was town?" "Tense," he admitted, setting down his bags. "There have been more raids. People are angry and scared." Her expression shuddered immediately. "I should leave." "What? No, I was not saying that. But you are thinking it. If I am here and humans discover me, they will hurt you. I am putting you in danger. Grisha, you are not going anywhere. We will figure this out." "Figure what out?" She stood, brushing dirt from her hands with sharp movements. "I am a liability to you. The longer I stay, the more risk you take. I should go north into the deep mountains. Maybe I can survive alone." "You would die alone up there," Harold said flatly. "Winter is coming in a few months. You have no supplies, no weapons. And even if you survive the cold, you said yourself your clan would kill you if they found you. Then what do you suggest?" Her voice was rising, frustration and fear bleeding through. "I cannot stay here forever. I cannot go back to my people. I cannot live among humans. What future is there for me?" "I do not know," Harold said honestly. "But running off alone into the wilderness is not the answer. Why do you care?" Grisha demanded, and there were tears starting to gather in her eyes now, her careful control cracking. "Why does it matter to you what happens to me? I am just some orc you found in a ditch." "Because you are not just some orc." Harold shot back, his own emotions getting the better of him. "You are Grisha. You are clever and kind, and you make terrible jokes, and you have been learning to read, and you have spent the last 3 weeks helping me run this farm. You matter. To me, you matter." The words hung in the air between them, too honest, too raw. Grisha stared at him with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open in shock. Harold felt his face heating, suddenly aware that he had said far more than he meant to. Grisha started, then stopped. She looked lost, vulnerable in a way he had never seen her. "No one has ever said something like that to me before." "Well, it is true," Harold said, trying to gentle his tone. "So no, I do not want you to leave. I want you to stay here where it is safe, and we will work out the rest as it comes." "It is not safe here. Not for either of us, not anymore." "Safer than the alternatives." Grisha shook her head, but he could see the fight draining out of her. "You are a stubborn human. And you are a stubborn orc. We will figure this out together, all right." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Then she nodded slowly. "All right. Together." That night over dinner, they talked seriously about their options. Harold suggested she could potentially travel west, toward the coast, where the cities were larger and more diverse. There might be places there where an orc could blend in, or at least not be immediately attacked on sight. "But you would need money for travel," he said. "And papers, identification. I do not know how to get those for you." "The western cities are controlled by human kingdoms," Grisha pointed out. "They have laws against orcs entering without being enslaved or imprisoned. I would be caught." "What about south toward the desert kingdoms?" "Perhaps. I have heard they are more accepting of different races. But it is months of travel and dangerous. I would need supplies, protection." They went back and forth, but every option seemed fraught with obstacles. Finally, Harold said, "What do you want? If you could choose anything, what would you want?" Grisha was quiet, staring down at her empty bowl. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I want to stay here. With you. I want to tend the garden and cook meals and learn to read properly. I want to feel safe. I have never felt safe before, not really. But here with you I do. Harold's heart clenched. I want that too, he admitted, but I do not know how to make it work. If people find out, they will come after both of us. Then we do not let them find out. You want to hide, forever, if that is what it takes. She looked up at him, fierce determination in her yellow eyes. I am tired of running. I am tired of being what everyone expects me to be. If I can have just one place where I am allowed to exist, I will fight for it. Something settled in Harold at those words, a decision crystallizing. Then you stay. We will be careful. You stay in the house when I go to town. We keep the curtains drawn. As far as anyone knows, I live here alone. What if someone visits? No one visits. I am not exactly popular. People respect me well enough, but I keep to myself. What about the raids? If they continue, humans will come searching the area. They might come here. Then we deal with that when it happens. But Grisha, I am not making you leave. Not unless you want to go. She reached across the table and took his hand, her grip strong and warm. I do not want to go. I want to stay with you. The touch sent heat racing through him, and Harold had to resist the urge to turn his hand over and lace his fingers with hers. This was already complicated enough, without adding that kind of tension to it. But he did not pull away, just let her hold his hand while they sat in the quiet kitchen with the fire crackling softly. Then it is settled, he said. You stay. Grisha smiled, real and genuine and bright, and Harold thought it might be the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The next few weeks passed with deceptive peace. Grisha continued to help with the farm work, proving herself surprisingly adept at handling the animals and maintaining the property. She had a knack for it, Harold realized, a patience and steady competence that served her well. The garden she had planted was thriving under her care, and she had even begun making improvements to the house, small repairs and organizational changes that made everything more efficient. They settled into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Harold would wake first and start the morning chores while Grisha prepared breakfast. They would eat together, then work through the day on various tasks, breaking for lunch and then continuing until evening. Dinner was a shared effort, and afterward they would sit by the fire, Harold reading aloud while Grisha worked on mending clothes or preparing food for the next day. It was comfortable, easy, and Harold found himself increasingly aware of how much he looked forward to every moment of it. The sound of Grisha humming while she cooked, the way she would squint at the pages when he taught her new words, her tusks catching the firelight, the feel of her shoulder brushing against his when they sat close together. He was falling for her. Had probably been falling for her since that first meal when she had looked at him with gratitude and wonder. But he kept that truth locked away, unwilling to complicate things further. She was here because she had nowhere else to go, and he would not take advantage of that. Their friendship was enough. It had to be. One evening in late summer, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Grisha said, "Tell me about your family." Harold glanced at her. "Not much to tell. My parents ran this farm. They were good people, worked hard. Fever took them during a bad winter when I was 17. You have no siblings?" "No, just me. My mother could not have more children after I was born, something to do with the birth. So it was the three of us. You must have been lonely." "Sometimes," Harold admitted. "But I had friends in town and the farm kept me busy." "What about you? Siblings?" "Two brothers," Grisha said. "Both older. Both killed in raids before I had seen 14 summers. My father was a war leader. He died when I was very young, charging a human fortress. I do not remember him." I am sorry, that must have been hard on your mother. She never spoke of him. Grief is weakness in my clan. You mourn privately and briefly, then you move on. That is the way. That sounds awful. Grisha huffed a soft laugh. It was all I knew. But yes, I think it was awful. All that pain with nowhere to put it. She paused. Is it different for humans? We grieve openly, usually. Have funerals, ceremonies. Take time to process the loss. At least that is how it is supposed to work. That sounds better, more honest. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Harold was acutely aware of how close she was sitting, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. If he shifted even slightly, their shoulders would touch. "Harold," Grisha said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you never marry? You are a good man, not cruel or ugly. You could have found a wife." Harold felt his chest tighten. "I thought about it," he said carefully. "Before the war, there was a girl in town, Mary Vaughn. We were friendly, might have courted properly if I had not been conscripted. But by the time I came back, she had married someone else. And after that—" He shrugged. "I was busy with the farm, and I suppose I never met anyone who made me want to try." "Until now," Grisha said, so softly he almost missed it. Harold turned to look at her, his heart suddenly hammering. "What?" She met his eyes, hers glowing faintly in the gathering darkness. "I think you want to try now with me." He should deny it. Should laugh it off, make a joke, preserve their careful friendship. But the words would not come. Instead, he just stared at her, frozen, unable to lie. "I want to try too," Grisha continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I know it is impossible. I know I am orc and you are human and the world would not accept it. But I cannot stop thinking about you, about your kindness and your strength and the way you look at me like I am worth something. I have never felt like this before." "Grisha," Harold managed, his voice rough, "we cannot. It is too complicated. I know." She looked away, her jaw tight. "I know. Forget I said anything." I should not have. Harold reached out and gently turned her face back toward him, his hand cupping her cheek. Her skin was warm beneath his palm, smooth despite her warrior's life. She went very still, her eyes wide and searching. "I did not say I do not want to," he said quietly. "I just said it is complicated, so you do want." "Yes," Harold admitted, the word coming out like a confession. "I want to try, with you. I have wanted it for weeks now, but I did not know if you felt the same. And I was afraid of pushing you, of taking advantage when you had nowhere else to go." "You are not taking advantage," Grisha said firmly. "I am choosing this, choosing you. Then I choose you too." The kiss was tentative at first, both of them uncertain. Her tusks made it slightly awkward, and Harold had to angle his head carefully. But then she made a small sound in the back of her throat and leaned into him, one hand coming up to grip his shirt. And suddenly, it did not matter that it was complicated or impossible. All that mattered was the feel of her mouth against his, the way she kissed him with fierce tenderness, the fact that she was here and real and wanting him as much as he wanted her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grisha rested her forehead against his. "I was afraid," she whispered. "Afraid you would reject me." "Never," Harold promised. "I could never reject you." They sat there under the stars, holding each other, and for the first time in years Harold felt completely content. It did not matter what challenges lay ahead. They would face them together. The following days took on a new dimension as they navigated their changed relationship. They were careful not to rush, both aware that this was new territory for them. Grisha had never been courted or romantic with anyone, her life having been consumed by warrior training. And Harold had not been with anyone since before the war, his few youthful experiences feeling distant and different from this. But there was joy in the discovery. in learning how to hold her hand properly, fingers intertwined, in the way she would lean into him when they sat together by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, in stolen kisses in the kitchen while preparing meals, sweet and warm and right. Harold found himself smiling more than he had in years, a lightness in his chest that made even the hard farm work feel easier. And Grisha seemed to bloom under the affection, her guarded walls slowly crumbling, to reveal someone remarkably tender beneath the warrior exterior. They talked late into the nights now, sharing hopes and fears and secrets. Grisha told him about the brutal training she had endured, about watching friends die in raids, about the crushing weight of always having to prove herself strong enough in a culture that valued strength above all else. Harold shared his own war stories, the things he had never told anyone else, the friends he had lost, the orders he had hated following, the nightmares that still sometimes woke him in the darkness. She listened without judgment, her hand steady in his, and somehow the telling made the memories less sharp. "We are both broken in our own ways," she said one night as they lay together on his small couch, her back pressed against his chest, his arms wrapped around her. "Two people who did not fit in the worlds we were born into." "Maybe that is why we fit together," Harold murmured against her hair. "We understand each other. I like fitting together, me too. It was not all smooth going." There were moments of frustration when their different upbringings clashed. Grisha was accustomed to direct confrontation and blunt honesty, while Harold tended toward patience and measured responses. She sometimes pushed too hard, and he sometimes held back too much. But they learned to navigate those differences, to communicate and compromise, and through it all, there was the constant underlying tension of their situation. They were living on borrowed time, both knew it. The raids continued in the region, and the human settlements grew more paranoid and hostile. Harold heard talk in town of organized hunting parties going into the mountains, of bounties being placed on orc heads. He stopped going to town as much, making his trips quick and efficient, buying supplies and leaving before anyone could ask too many questions about his increasingly isolated existence. A few people commented that he seemed different, distracted, but no one pressed the issue. Then, on a cool autumn morning nearly 4 months after Grisha had first arrived, Harold returned from checking his fence line to find her standing in the doorway of the house with a strange expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, moving to her side. "There are riders coming," she said quietly. 3 of them, maybe 4, still distant but heading this way. Harold felt his blood run cold. "Get inside, hide in the cellar, do not come out no matter what you hear." "Harold, please, Grisha, if they find you here they will kill you." "Maybe kill me too, just hide." Her jaw was tight, but she nodded and disappeared into the house. Harold heard the trapdoor to the cellar open and close, and then silence. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart, and waited. The riders appeared about 20 minutes later, 4 men on horseback, all armed. Harold recognized them as he stepped out to meet them. Thomas Miller, whose farm had been hit by a raid. James Thompson, who had shot an orc during an attack, and 2 younger men he knew less well, both carrying bows. "Harold," Thomas called out as they approached. "Sorry to bother you." "No bother," Harold said, keeping his voice neutral. "What brings you out this way?" "We are tracking," James said, his expression hard. "Found orc tracks near my property, heading northeast. Thought we would sweep the area, make sure none of them are hiding out nearby." Harold felt sweat prickle at the back of his neck but kept his face calm. "Have not seen any orcs around here, but I will keep an eye out." "Mind if we look around your property?" Thomas asked. It was phrased as a question, but the tone made it clear it was not really optional. "Sure," Harold said, knowing refusal would only make them suspicious. Farmhouse is open if you want to check inside. Please let Grisha stay hidden. Please let the cellar door be well concealed enough. The men dismounted and began searching, two of them walking the perimeter of his property while Thomas and James approached the house. Harold followed them inside, watching with forced casualness as they looked through his main room and kitchen. "You living out here alone?" James asked, his eyes scanning the space. "Yes, always have. Must get lonely. I prefer the quiet." Thomas moved toward the bedrooms, and Harold's heart nearly stopped when he saw the man glance into Grisha's room, the room she had been sleeping in, where her few belongings were kept. But Harold had been careful. They had moved most of her things into his room weeks ago when the relationship between them had shifted, and the spare room looked appropriately unused now, just a bed with a bare mattress. "Everything looks fine," Thomas said, returning to the main room. "Sorry to intrude, Harold. We are just being cautious. I understand, these are dangerous times." "That they are." James moved toward the door, then paused. "If you do see anything, any sign of orcs, you will let us know, right?" "Of course," Harold lied smoothly. "I have no love for raiders." The men seemed satisfied with that and took their leave, mounting up and riding off toward the east. Harold waited until they were completely out of sight before he moved to the cellar door and knocked softly. "They are gone. It is safe." The door opened and Grisha emerged, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. Harold pulled her into his arms immediately, holding her tight. "That was too close," she said against his chest. I know. They will be back. If they keep searching, they will find evidence of me. Tracks in the garden, things I have touched. They will know." Harold wanted to argue, but he could not. She was right. They had been lucky this time, but luck ran out. And if a hunting party came back with more men, more thorough in their search, they would find proof of Grisha's presence. "We need a plan," he said. "A real plan, not just hoping we stay hidden." That night they talked seriously about their options again. Running was still dangerous, but staying was becoming equally risky. They were trapped, caught between Harold's world and Grisha's, belonging to neither. "There might be one option," Grisha said slowly. "It is dangerous and probably foolish, but it might work." "What?" "We go to my old clan, together, you and me, and we challenge the war leader." Harold stared at her. "Challenge him how?" "In my culture, if you believe you have been wronged by a leader, you can demand justice through trial by combat. If I challenge the war leader with a champion fighting for me and we win, my exile is overturned. I am restored to the clan. And I would be your champion. Yes. You are a trained soldier, skilled in combat. You could win. Grisha, I have not fought in years. And you are asking me to beat an orc war leader in single combat. That is a death sentence. Maybe, but if you do win, we would both be safe. The clan would have to accept me back and by extension accept you. There are old laws about champions. If you fight for me and win, you become part of the clan by honor debt. And if I lose, then we both die. But Harold, we will die anyway if we stay here. The humans will find me eventually and they will kill us both. At least this way we fight for something, for a future." Harold wanted to say no, wanted to argue that it was insane, that there had to be another way. But as he looked at Grisha's fierce, hopeful expression, he realized she was right. Staying meant slowly waiting for discovery and death. Running meant a hard life on the road with no destination. This, as crazy as it was, at least offered a real chance. "All right," he said. "We do it. We go to your clan." Grisha's eyes widened. "You are serious?" "Yes." "I am not going to lose you, Grisha. If fighting an orc war leader is what it takes to keep you safe, to build a life together, then that is what I will do." She kissed him then, hard and desperate, and he kissed her back with equal intensity. When they broke apart, she said, "I love you." I have never said that to anyone before, but I love you, Harold. I love you too, he replied, the words feeling both momentous and natural. We are going to make this work. They spent the next week preparing. Harold pulled out his old military gear from where it had been stored in the barn, cleaning and oiling his sword and armor. The leather needed repair in places, and he spent hours working on it while Grisha gathered supplies for their journey. She taught him what she could remember of orc combat styles, the techniques and patterns their warriors used. It was different from his military training, more brutal and direct, but he absorbed it as best he could. They sparred in the yard with wooden practice weapons, and he was grimly pleased to find that his skills had not completely atrophied. He was rusty, yes, but still capable. "You are good," Grisha said after he disarmed her for the third time. "Better than I expected." 5 years of war training, Harold replied, breathing hard. "And I survived. That counts for something. It counts for a lot." She picked up the practice sword again. "Again, you need to be ready for anything." They trained until Harold's muscles screamed and his hands were blistered from gripping the wooden sword. But he pushed through, knowing that his life, their lives, would depend on his ability to win this fight. On the night before they were set to leave, Harold stood in the farmhouse he had spent his entire life in and tried to commit it to memory. The rough wooden walls he had helped his father build, the fireplace where his mother had cooked countless meals, the small touches he had added over the years. "Are you ready?" Grisha asked, coming to stand beside him. "No," Harold admitted, "but I am doing it anyway. We could still try to keep hiding. You said yourself that would not work. This is our best chance. I know, I am afraid of what might happen to you." Harold turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Whatever happens, it will be all right, because we will be together." "Together," she repeated, holding on to him like he was an anchor. They left at dawn, carrying packs with supplies and Harold wearing his old armor. It felt strange after so many years, the weight of it familiar but also foreign. Grisha led the way, navigating through the forest toward the mountains where her clan made their territory. It took 3 days of hard travel to reach the tribal lands. They camped rough at night, taking turns keeping watch, and gradually the terrain grew more rugged and hostile. Harold saw signs of orc presence, old campsites and marked trails, and his military instincts went on high alert. "We are close," Grisha said on the afternoon of the 3rd day. "There will be scouts watching. When they spot us, let me do the talking." "All right." They had barely gone another mile when figures emerged from the trees around them, 6 orc warriors with weapons drawn. They were large and intimidating, all wearing leather armor and carrying axes or swords. Their eyes widened when they saw Grisha. "Grisha," one of them said, his voice harsh with surprise. "You live, we thought you dead." "I survived," Grisha said coldly, "and I have come to challenge Crag for his treatment of me." "You dare return," another warrior snarled. "You are exile. We should kill you now." "You cannot. I invoke the right of justice challenge. I have a champion." She gestured to Harold. "This human fights for me." The warriors looked at Harold with obvious disdain, taking in his human features and his armor. "A human," one spat. "You bring a human to our lands. The old laws say any champion may fight for a wronged warrior. It does not specify race. Take us to Crag. Let me make my formal challenge." The warriors conferred in harsh Orcish that Harold could not follow, clearly debating what to do. Finally, the largest of them nodded curtly. "Fine. We take you to the war leader. But if he refuses your challenge, we kill you both." "He will not refuse. His honor demands he accept." They were surrounded by the 6 warriors and marched deeper into the mountains, eventually arriving at a large encampment carved into a mountain valley. There were dozens of orcs here, maybe more than 100, living in a mixture of permanent stone structures and temporary hide tents. Fires burned throughout the camp, and the smell of cooking meat and tanning leather hung heavy in the air. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Orcs gathered to stare as Grisha was led through the camp, the whispers following them like a wave. Harold kept his hand near his sword, hyper-aware of how outnumbered they were, how easily this could turn into a massacre. They were brought to a large stone building at the center of the camp, and inside sat an orc who could only be Crag. He was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with scars covering his green skin and tusks that protruded prominently. He was sharpening an enormous axe when they entered, and he looked up with cold, calculating eyes. "Grisha," he said, his voice like grinding stone. "I am surprised. I did not think you strong enough to survive exile." "I survived," Grisha said, stepping forward despite the warriors flanking her. "And I have come to challenge you. You wronged me, Crag. You punished me for refusing to murder a child. You left me to die for having a conscience. I demand justice." Crag's eyes narrowed. "You demand? You are exile, traitor. You have no rights here. The old laws say differently. Any warrior who believes they have been wronged may seek justice through trial. You know this, Crag. You cannot refuse without shaming yourself." A murmur ran through the assembled orcs who had crowded into the building to watch. Crag's jaw tightened, and Harold could see the war leader calculating, weighing his options. To refuse would make him look weak, like he was afraid of Grisha's accusation. But to accept meant fighting. "Fine," Crag said slowly. "I accept your challenge. You will fight me, and when I kill you, your dishonor will be erased in blood." "I will not be fighting you," Grisha said. "My champion will, as is my right." "Your champion?" Crag's eyes slid to Harold and his mouth twisted in contempt. "A human. You insult me. He is a warrior. He has fought in wars and survived. He meets the requirements of the law." "Barely." Crag stood, his full height towering over even Harold. "Very well. Tomorrow at dawn we fight. If your human defeats me, your exile is lifted. But when he falls, Grisha, you will die with him. Painfully." "Agreed," Grisha said firmly. They were given a small space to sleep for the night, a hide tent at the edge of the camp with 2 warriors stationed outside to ensure they did not flee. Once alone, Grisha turned to Harold with worry etched on her face. "He is bigger than I remembered," she said. "Stronger. Harold, I should not have asked this of you." "You did not ask. I volunteered." Harold checked his sword, testing the edge. "I have fought large opponents before. Size is not everything. He will be slower than me. He has been war leader for 10 years. He has killed dozens of challengers. Then I will be clever." Harold set down his sword and pulled Grisha into his arms. "I am not going to lose, not when we finally have a chance at a real future." She buried her face against his neck, and he felt her shoulders shake. "I am so afraid." "Me too," he admitted. "But we are going to get through this. Trust me." They held each other through the long night, neither sleeping much, taking what comfort they could in the warmth and solidity of each other. When dawn finally began to lighten the sky, they emerged from the tent to find the entire camp assembled in a large cleared area. Crag stood in the center of the ring, his massive axe resting on his shoulder, looking fresh and confident. Harold took his place opposite him, rolling his shoulders to loosen tight muscles. His armor felt solid around him, his sword familiar in his grip. An old female orc, possibly a shaman given the bones and feathers decorating her clothing, stepped forward to officiate. She spoke in formal Orcish that Harold mostly understood, laying out the rules. Fight until one was dead or yielded. No outside interference. The judgment of combat was final. "Begin," the shaman said and stepped back. Crag moved first, faster than Harold expected for someone his size. The axe swung in a brutal arc that would have taken Harold's head off if he had not ducked and rolled to the side. He came up with his sword ready, parrying the next strike with a jarring impact that numbed his arms. The war leader was strong, incredibly strong. Each blow felt like getting hit by a battering ram, and Harold knew he could not match that strength. But he did not need to. He needed to be faster, smarter. He gave ground, letting Crag advance, studying the orc's patterns. The axe was a devastating weapon, but it required commitment. Each swing left Crag slightly off balance for a fraction of a second. Harold just needed to find the right opening. They circled and clashed, the sound of metal on metal ringing through the valley. Harold took a glancing blow to his shoulder that tore through his leather armor and left a burning line of pain. He retaliated with a slash that caught Crag's thigh, drawing green blood. The orc grunted but did not slow. If anything, he seemed to get angrier, his attacks coming faster and more reckless. Harold used that, dancing back and striking when opportunities presented, landing small cuts that accumulated. But he was tiring too. His arms ached from blocking the heavy axe, and his breath came hard. One solid hit from Crag would end this. He could not afford to make a mistake. Crag raised his axe for an overhead smash, putting his full strength behind it. Harold saw his chance. Instead of blocking or dodging, he stepped inside the arc of the swing, too close for the axe to connect. He drove his shoulder into Crag's chest, throwing the larger warrior off balance, and then swept his sword up in a precise strike. The blade caught Crag under the arm, sliding between ribs, finding something vital. The war leader's eyes went wide with shock and pain. He stumbled back, the axe falling from his grip, his hand going to the wound that was now pouring blood. Harold kicked the axe away and leveled his sword at Crag's throat. "Yield," he commanded. For a moment Crag just stared at him, disbelief written across his scarred face. Then slowly the war leader sank to his knees. "I yield," he rasped. "The human has won." A shocked silence fell over the assembled orcs. Harold kept his sword steady, not trusting this to be over until it was made official. The shaman stepped forward, examining Crag's wound with expert eyes, then turned to address the crowd. "The challenge is met. The human has defeated our war leader. By the old laws, Grisha's exile is lifted, and her champion is bound to our clan by honor debt." She looked at Harold. "You are part of our tribe now, human. Do you accept?" Harold looked past her to where Grisha stood at the edge of the circle, her face wet with tears and her eyes shining with hope. He smiled at her. "I accept." The camp erupted into noise, orcs shouting and arguing and debating this unprecedented turn of events. Healers rushed forward to tend to Crag's wound while Harold was swarmed by warriors wanting to examine the human who had defeated their war leader. Grisha pushed through the crowd and threw herself into his arms, and Harold held her tight despite his exhaustion and pain. "We did it," she sobbed against him. "We actually did it." "Told you I would win," he said, trying for levity despite the way his legs were shaking. "You are insane and I love you too." A healer approached and insisted on checking Harold's injuries, the shoulder wound needing stitches. As he was being tended to, the shaman approached with several of the elder orcs, their expressions a mixture of respect and uncertainty. "This is unprecedented," the shaman said. "A human joining our clan. It will cause complications." "I do not care about complications," Harold said firmly. "I fought for the right to be here, to be with Grisha. If your laws say I am part of the clan now, then I am part of the clan." One of the elders, an old male with white streaked through his hair, nodded slowly. "You fight with honor. You could have killed Crag, but you gave him the chance to yield. That shows respect for our ways." He looked at Grisha. You chose well, daughter of Mara. Your human has a warrior's heart. He has more than that, Grisha said. He has compassion and kindness, qualities our clan needs more of. That sparked fresh debate among the elders, but Harold was too tired to follow it. He had won. They were safe. That was all that mattered. The next few weeks were a strange adjustment. Harold, as Grisha's champion and now a member of the clan, was given a space to live in one of the stone structures. Grisha moved in with him immediately, and they began the complicated process of building a life in this new context. Not all the orcs were happy about a human joining the tribe. There was resentment and suspicion, especially from those who had lost family members to humans during the war. But there was also grudging respect for Harold's combat skills, and slowly, carefully, he began to find his place. He helped with tasks around the camp, using his farming knowledge to improve their food stores and his military experience to suggest better defensive positions. Grisha remained at his side through all of it, serving as translator and advocate, helping him navigate the complex social dynamics of clan life. Crag recovered from his wound, and to Harold's surprise, the former war leader did not seem to hold a grudge. If anything, he was respectful, acknowledging that he had been beaten fairly. The shaman explained that in orc culture, losing a challenge did not bring shame as long as you fought with honor. Crag had, and so had Harold, and that earned mutual respect. You have changed things, Crag said to Harold one evening as they shared a meal. Grisha sat beside Harold, her hand in his. Made us question old certainties. Not all of us like it, but perhaps it is necessary. We have been at war with humans for generations. Maybe it is time to try something different. Maybe, Harold agreed. Though I am just one person, I cannot change centuries of conflict. You can start the conversation, the old shaman said, joining them. Show that humans and orcs can coexist, can even care for each other. She looked pointedly at the way Harold and Grisha were sitting close together, clearly a couple. We do care for each other, Grisha said firmly, and we are going to build a life together, here with the clan. Then you will need this, the shaman said, pulling out a length of braided cord with stone beads woven into it. It is a bonding cord. In our culture, when two people commit to each other, they exchange these. It is like your human marriage, but simpler. Grisha took the cord with wide eyes. You would allow us to bond formally. The elders have discussed it. You are both members of the clan now. You have the right. The shaman smiled, the expression making her weathered face look younger. Besides, it is clear you already consider yourselves mated. Might as well make it official. That night, under the stars with the whole clan as witnesses, Harold and Grisha performed the bonding ceremony. It was simple but profound. They each spoke their commitment to the other, their voices steady and sure. Then Grisha tied the braided cord around Harold's wrist, and he tied a matching one around hers. Bonded, the shaman declared. May your union be strong and your years together be many. The clan celebrated with food and drink and music, and Harold found himself swept into the festivities despite his initial awkwardness. These people, these orcs he had been taught to fear and hate, were welcoming him as one of their own. It was surreal and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Later, alone in their home with Grisha curled against him, Harold looked at the cord around his wrist and felt something settle deep in his chest. Peace. Belonging. He had found what he had been searching for without even realizing he was looking. What are you thinking? Grisha murmured sleepily. That I love you, that I am glad I pulled up that chair and sat with you. She smiled against his shoulder. I am glad too. Thank you for staying, for fighting for us. Always, Harold promised. I will always stay. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people from different worlds who had built a bridge between them. And in the morning, they woke to begin their life together properly, surrounded by a clan that had accepted them despite all odds. Harold continued to bring his knowledge to the clan, teaching them better farming techniques that would make them less reliant on raiding. He worked with the hunters to establish trade routes with some of the more isolated human settlements, carefully building relationships that could potentially lead to peace. It was slow work, and there were setbacks. Some humans refused to trade with orcs under any circumstances. Some orcs saw the efforts at peace as weakness. But gradually, carefully, progress was made. Grisha worked alongside him, using her position as someone who understood both cultures to mediate and explain. She proved to be a gifted negotiator, able to find common ground where others saw only differences. 1 year after Harold had first found Grisha in that ditch, they stood together on a ridge overlooking the clan's valley, watching the sun set over the mountains. Harold's farm was far away now, sold to a neighbor with the understanding that he would not be returning. This was his home now, this rugged mountain settlement with its complicated politics and its people who had slowly become his family. "You regret it?" Grisha asked. "Giving up your old life?" Harold considered the question seriously, then shook his head. "No, that farm was just a place. This with you is a life. It is everything." "Even when Horg makes fun of your accent, even then," Harold said, laughing. Horg was a young warrior who delighted in mocking Harold's pronunciation of orcish words, but it was done with affection rather than malice now. "Even when the winter stores run low, because we took in that refugee family from the southern clan, even then. Even when I wake you up at odd hours because I have nightmares about my exile," Harold pulled her against him, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Especially then. Grisha, you are my partner, my mate, my love. There is nowhere I would rather be than right here with you." She turned in his arms and kissed him properly, deep and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she said, "I want to show you something." She led him back down into the valley, through the camp to a section where new construction was happening. A stone house was being built, larger than most of the others, with separate rooms and even glass windows that Harold had arranged to trade for. "This is ours," Grisha said. "The clan is building it for us as a bonding gift. It will be finished before the snow comes." Harold stared at the structure, emotion welling up in his throat. Their own home, a place that was truly theirs, built with the support and acceptance of the community. "It is perfect," he managed. "It is a beginning," Grisha corrected. "Our beginning. Everything we do from here, we build together." "Together," Harold agreed, taking her hand. The bonding cord on his wrist caught the evening light, the beads glinting. They stood there in front of their future home. Two people who should have been enemies but had instead chosen to love each other against all odds. Around them, the clan continued their evening routines, the sounds of life and laughter and argument filling the air. It was not a perfect life. There were still challenges ahead, still people on both sides who would not accept their union or the peace they were trying to build. But they had each other, and they had a community that slowly was learning that perhaps the old ways did not have to be the only ways. Harold thought back to that first meal, to the way Grisha had sat in his kitchen refusing to eat until he pulled up a chair and stayed. That simple act of sitting together, of sharing space and time, had changed everything. Had led them here to this moment, to a life neither of them could have imagined. "Thank you," he said to Grisha, pulling her close. "For what? For refusing to eat alone. For giving me a reason to stay." She smiled, her tusks catching the light, her yellow eyes warm with love. "Thank you for pulling up that chair, for seeing me as more than just an orc, for loving me enough to fight for us." They kissed again as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors. And when they finally broke apart and headed back to their current home for the evening meal, they walked hand in hand, their matching bonding cords marking them as committed, as mated, as forever. The meal that night was a large communal affair, the whole clan gathering to eat together as was their custom. Harold sat beside Grisha at one of the long tables, surrounded by warriors and hunters and crafters who were becoming friends. The food was passed around and stories were shared, and laughter rang out into the evening air. And as Harold ate with Grisha pressed against his side and his new family around him, he realized that this was what home truly meant. Not a place, but people. Not walls and land, but connection and love and belonging. He had pulled up a chair and stayed. And in doing so, he had found everything he had never known he needed. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and full of challenges. But they would face it together, this human and this orc who had built a bridge between their worlds one meal at a time. And that, Harold thought as he looked at Grisha's smiling face in the firelight, was worth everything. They had fought for their right to be together, had overcome exile and prejudice and violence. And now they had won something precious, a chance at happiness, at peace, at a life built on their own terms. As the evening deepened and the celebrations continued around them, Harold squeezed Grisha's hand and she squeezed back, and they both knew without words that they had made the right choice. Love, it turned out, was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth pulling up a chair and staying for. And so they did, for all the days that followed, building their life together, one shared meal, one quiet moment, one act of courage at a time. The orc girl who had refused to eat alone had found someone willing to sit with her, to stay with her, to build a future with her. And the farmer who had been living half a life in isolation had found purpose and passion and partnership. Together they were whole. Together they were home. Together they were exactly where they were meant to be, and that was the greatest victory of all.